Imagine a scent so powerful, it carries you across time, across borders, across love, and across loss. In the Book of Everlasting Things by Aanchal Malhotra, perfume is more than just fragrance. It is memory, history, and heartache. And behind this story of love and longing lies a real history that shaped millions of lives, the Partition of India. But what do everyday objects, say a letter, a vial of perfume, a rusted key, tell us about a divided past? That's what Malhotra explores in Remnants of Partition and Remnants of a Separation. Today we're diving into all three books to uncover the history behind the fiction, the real stories behind the symbols, and why objects carry the weight of our collective past. Let's step through the pages together. Welcome to Gateway Books by Crestance, where historical fiction opens the door to real history. I'm Cindy Cruz, your book-obsessed guide to the past, and today we have a truly immersive episode ahead. We're diving into the Book of Everlasting Things, a novel that blends love, loss, and perfume with the seismic impact of India's partition. But as always, we don't stop with fiction here, we go deeper. To fully grasp the world of this novel, we'll explore Aanchal Malhotra's two historical works, Remnants of Partition and Remnants of a Separation. These books bring us the true stories of those who lived through partition, using everyday objects as a lens into their memory. So get comfortable, maybe light a candle that smells of nostalgia, and let's explore the power of scent, history, and storytelling. And hey, if you're loving these deep dives, don't forget to like and subscribe. Just click below. Now let's get to it. Let's step into the world of the Book of Everlasting Things, a novel that isn't just a story, it is an experience. Imagine a world where scent is memory, where perfume is not just a fragrance but a container of history, love, and longing. Aanchal Malhotra takes us deep into the early 20th century, into the heart of Lahore, where two lovers find themselves caught in the tides of history. This book is a sweeping tale that combines romance, history, and the deep sensory experience of scent. At the heart of the novel is Samir, a Hindu perfumer, and Firdaus, a Muslim calligrapher. Their love blossoms in a Lahore that is still undivided, still whole. But as history marches forward, the partition of India in 1947 threatens not just their story, but their entire world. What was once a shared homeland becomes a divided land, forcing impossible choices and devastating losses. One of the novel's most compelling aspects is the use of scent as a metaphor for memory. Think about it. How often does a smell bring you to a moment in your past? The scent of rain, say, on dry earth, or the perfume of a loved one, or the smell of an old book? Malhotra uses perfume as a storytelling device, infusing the novel with deep sensory richness that makes the story feel immediate and personal. Samir's skills as a perfumer allow him to capture moments in a bottle, distilling not just ingredients, but emotions and stories. However, the Book of Everlasting Things isn't just a love story. It's also a meditation on identity and belonging. The novel asks, what happens when the land you call home is suddenly a foreign country? Where do you belong when the lines on a map shift overnight? Samir and Firdaus embody these questions, each facing their own struggles as partition forces them onto separate paths. And this isn't just a fictionalized backdrop. The partition of India in 1947 was one of the most violent and traumatic events in South Asian history. Millions of people were displaced, entire communities were uprooted, and families were torn apart. Through Samir and Firdaus, we get a deeply human perspective on what this meant for ordinary people who never asked for war, division, or exile. Malhotra's writing is poetic, and it's also deeply researched. She doesn't just tell us what happens, she makes you feel it. The novel paints a picture of Lahore before partition as a city full of art, culture, and interwoven faiths, and then contrasts it with the devastation and the loss that followed. The reader experiences the heartbreak of watching a world unravel, seeing love battle against forces absolutely beyond its control. And this is what makes the Book of Everlasting Things so intense. It's not just about the past. It's about how history lingers in the present. It's about how memories of a lost home can be carried in a scent, in a word, or in an object. And it's a story that feels deeply relevant today. Borders continue to divide people, religious and political conflicts still shape destinies, and migration remains a defining human experience. Malhotra's novel reminds us that history isn't just something that happens, it's something that lives within us, and in our stories, in our senses, and in those things that we hold dear. So why should you read the Book of Everlasting Things? Because it will transport you. Because it will remind you of the power of memory, of scent, of love, and of history's indelible mark in our lives. If you love historical fiction that immerses you completely, this is a book you won't want to miss. Now that we've explored the historical fiction Malhotra has created, let's turn to the real history that inspired it. In Remnants of Partition, Malhotra shifts from fiction to oral history, gathering real-life stories of those who lived through the Partition of India. And these are not just characters on a page. They are real people who carried their past with them in the most unexpected ways. Let's dive in. If the Book of Everlasting Things shows us how deeply personal history can be through fictional characters, Remnants of Partition does it with real-life voices and tangible objects left behind by one of the most significant upheavals of the 20th century, the Partition of India. Partition is often talked about in terms of numbers, millions displaced, hundreds of thousands killed. But what about the individual stories? The memories carried not in history books, but in everyday items that people took with them when they left behind. That's the heart of Remnants of Partition. Aanchal Malhotra approaches history differently. She doesn't just document facts, she collects memories. She interviews people who lived through partition and asks them about the objects they brought with them during their migration. These objects, things like letters, utensils, pieces of fabric, and even soil from ancestral lands, become symbols of loss, longing, and resilience. One of the most moving accounts in Remnants of Partition is the story of a man who fled from what is now Pakistan to India, carrying with him nothing but a handful of earth from his childhood home. For decades, he kept this soil in a small bottle, a literal piece of the past that he could touch. This simple act of preservation speaks to the pain of exile, the emotional weight of being uprooted, and the desperate need to hold on to something tangible from a lost homeland. Malhotra's work reminds us that history is not just something that happens in textbooks. It's something that happens in kitchens, in conversations, and in the objects we cherish. A rusted house key carried across the border might seem insignificant to an outsider, but to its owner, it is proof of a home that once was, a door that may never be opened again. Another powerful account in the book describes a family who, in the chaos of partition, left behind an ornate Quran that had been in their family for generations. Years later, a stranger from the same village, who had also migrated but in the opposite direction, returned the Quran to them, ensuring it made its way back to the rightful owners. This story speaks to the human connections that transcend political borders and the friendships and goodwill that survive despite everything. What makes Remnants of Partition particularly compelling is its focus on how these objects, no matter how small, act as witnesses to history. When governments draw lines on a map, they don't erase memories. The people who lived through partition carry those memories with them, embedded in objects that became sacred keepers of their histories. And it's not just about nostalgia, it's about identity. What does it mean to belong to a country that didn't exist when you were born? How do you define a home when the place you grew up in no longer considers you one of its own? The book explores these questions through the deeply personal recollections of those who lived through the trauma of forced migration. Malhotra's approach also highlights how these memories have been passed down through generations. Many of the Many of the people she interviews are children or grandchildren of partition survivors. They've inherited not just objects, but the stories and emotions attached to them. The trauma of displacement doesn't disappear with the first generation. It lingers. It shapes identities, it influences perspectives, and sometimes it even determines life choices. What's particularly striking about Remnants of Partition is its ability to make history feel intimate. It's easy to look at partition as a massive political event, but Malhotra brings it down to a human level. The book is filled with personal anecdotes, touching moments, and stories of resilience that make the history come alive in a way that a textbook just never could quite achieve. So, why does this book matter today? Because the scars of partition still exist. The borders that were drawn in 1947 continue to shape politics, relationships, and identities in India, Pakistan, and now Bangladesh. And as generations pass, it becomes even more crucial to document these personal histories before they are lost forever. Remnants of Partition is more than just a historical account. It's a bridge between the past and present, between personal and political, between loss and remembrance. It reminds us that history is not just something we read about, it's something we live with every day. Now, let's take it a step further. Let's explore how Malhotra continues this journey of storytelling and preservation. If Remnants of Partition focuses on the history of partition through objects, Remnants of the Separation takes an even more intimate approach, one that moves beyond objects and into the deeply personal recollections of those who lived through it. Through a series of oral histories, Malhotra brings to life the voices of those who experienced one of the largest forced migrations in human history. Partition is often reduced to maps, dates, and statistics, but Remnants of a Separation reminds us that history is lived through individuals. The book focuses on stories from India and Pakistan, featuring accounts of people who were forced to leave their homes carrying only what they could, and sometimes only their memories. These stories are haunting, heartbreaking, and deeply moving. One of the most compelling aspects of the book is how Malhotra uncovers not just the pain of separation, but also the complexities of identity. What does it mean to have been born in a country that no longer exists in the same way? How does memory shift when a homeland becomes an unreachable place, accessible only through stories? These are the questions that Remnants of a Separation seeks to explore. One of the most touching accounts is that of an elderly woman who describes how, as a young girl, she left her home in Lahore overnight, believing she would return within days. She packed only a few clothes, a comb, and a favorite book. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and she never returned. Decades later, she still has the book, a tangible reminder of a home that now belongs to someone else. Another interview tells the story of a man whose father owned a thriving business in what became Pakistan. When the family fled to India, they were forced to start from nothing. The only thing they carried from their own life was a set of brass utensils, a reminder of meals shared in a home that no longer belonged to them. Those utensils were never used again, but they were kept, polished, and displayed. A silent acknowledgement of a life lost but not forgotten. What makes Remnants of a Separation so powerful is the way Malhotra allows these voices to stand on their own. She doesn't interpret their pain or filter their grief. She simply lets them speak. This creates a deeply immersive experience for the reader, allowing us to step into the past through the words of those who lived it. The book also reveals an unexpected thread: the surprising friendships and connections that survived despite partition. In some cases, people who were displaced found ways to stay in touch with their childhood friend across the border. Letters were exchanged, gifts were sent, and in rare cases, reunions happened. These stories are reminders that while partition created political borders, it could not always sever the human connections. And beyond the personal memories, Remnants of a Separation also explores how the trauma of partition has been passed down through generations. Many of the people Malhotra interviewed are children or grandchildren of the survivors. They speak of growing up in households where partition was never openly discussed, yet its presence loomed large. Some inherited objects from the past without knowing their full significance until much later. Others grew up hearing fragmented stories, only to piece them together as adults. The book also raises critical questions about memory itself. How do we remember? What do we choose to preserve, and what fades with time? As the last generation of partition survivors ages, there is an urgency to document their stories before they are lost forever. Malhotra's work is part of a larger effort to ensure that these voices are heard, that these histories are acknowledged, and that the pain of displacement is never forgotten. As we reflect on Remnants of a Separation, it becomes clear that partition is not just a historical event. It is a lived experience that continues to shape lives today. Borders may have been drawn, but the echoes of partition remain carried forward in histories, in heirlooms, and in the identities of those who remember. And now that we've explored both Remnants of Partition and Remnants of a Separation, let's bring it all together. How do these books connect with the Book of Everlasting Things? What do they teach us about history, memory, and the power of storytelling? Let's wrap it all up. 3 books, 1 history, countless lives forever changed. What the Book of Everlasting Thing does through fiction, Remnants of Partition and Remnants of a Separation do through personal history. They remind us that the past isn't just found in textbooks, it's in letters, perfume bottles, and the things we choose to carry with us. Malhotra's work is a testament to the idea that objects hold stories, and stories hold power. These books also remind us that history is never just about the past. It echoes in our present, shaping identities, relationships, and even conflicts today. The legacy of partition is still felt in India and Pakistan in the way that borders divide nations but can never truly divide human connections. By reading and remembering these stories, we honor the resilience of those who lived through these events and ensure that their voices are not lost to time. Thank you for listening to Gateway Books by Crestance. If you enjoyed today's journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Love books so much you wish you could wear them? We got you covered. Check out www.crestance.com for book lover gear that speaks to your literary obsession. And don't forget, you can get 3 free audiobooks with a trial of audiobooks.com. Just click the link below. Until next time, keep reading and keep exploring the past through the pages of great books. I'm your host, Cindy Cruz. See you soon.